What if we are not the beginning, but the last breath of something ancient? What if our story, the story of Homo sapiens, is not the story, but the final chapter in a book written by many hands, across 1,000,000 forgotten years? Most of us grow up believing we are the pinnacle. The lone survivors. The chosen species that rose from the dust and conquered the planet. But that's a myth. A comforting illusion crafted by the arrogance of the present. Because long before we ever walked alone, others walked beside us. They had fire. They had families. They made tools. They mourned their dead. They looked to the stars, and wondered, just like we do. And then, one by one, they vanished. Not just one species. Not two. But dozens, entire branches of the human tree that withered in silence while one branch, ours, grew louder. Tonight, we go looking for their names. Their bones. Their echoes. We peel back time not to worship the past, but to understand the cost of becoming who we are. Because the truth is unsettling. We were never alone. And we may not have always deserved to win. 3,000,000 years ago, the earth was not ruled by cities, machines, or languages. It pulsed with silence. It breathed through trees, rivers, and herds. And among the shadows of this forgotten wilderness, evolution was sculpting its most ambitious creation, not one being, but many. Not a single destiny, but a mosaic of human forms, scattered across continents, shaped by environment, trial, and time. We call them hominins, the early walkers, thinkers, toolmakers. They were not a single species, but a vast and branching tree, sprouting experimental limbs that reached for the future. Some bore heavy jaws and tiny brains. Others walked upright before they could speak. Some lived in forests. Others wandered deserts. And still, they were all human, in their own way. Australopithecus was among the first. Small, upright, half ape, half mystery. But soon came more, Homo habilis, the handy man, crafting stone edges under African skies. Then Homo erectus, fire-bringer, distance walker, colonizer of lands far beyond Africa. These were not ancestors lined up in neat order. They were contemporaries. Competitors. Cousins. For hundreds of thousands of years, multiple human species lived side by side, unaware they would be remembered as before us. There were no borders. No manifest destinies. Just survival, and silence. Our origins are not the beginning of a story. They are the middle of many. And only through fossils, bones, and fragments of tools do we hear their whispers. What made us different? What made us last? The next chapter begins when we stopped being one of many, and became the one that remained. For a long time, the earth was not ours alone. It was shared. Not just with animals or predators, but with other humans, different, yet familiar. They hunted. They crafted. They loved. Their eyes, if you looked closely, might have mirrored your own. But nature doesn't reward similarity. It rewards adaptation. Somewhere between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago, the world became crowded, not with numbers, but with identities. Homo heidelbergensis, a transitional species. Homo naledi, buried deep in the South African caves, small-brained yet possibly spiritual. Homo floresiensis, the hobbit of Indonesia, tiny and isolated. And Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthals, thick-browed and misunderstood. They were not our enemies. Not exactly. But they were not our future either. Then came us, Homo sapiens. Leaner. More social. Abstract in thought. Artists. Traders. Mythmakers. At some point, these species crossed paths. Not as armies, but as shadows. Sometimes peacefully. Sometimes violently. Occasionally, intimately, the evidence lives in our DNA. But in the end, one by one, the others vanished. Why? No single answer explains it. Climate shifts. Competition for resources. Disease. Perhaps even genocide. But it's also possible, and more haunting, that survival didn't require conflict, just patience. A few more generations. A few better tools. A slightly stronger network of stories and skills. And in that quiet drift, the human world narrowed, until only one voice remained. The extinction of our siblings wasn't a battle. It was a disappearance. And in their absence, we became alone. What must it have felt like to see another human, not like you? To stare across the firelight and recognize a face shaped differently, but familiar in its gaze? Did they fear each other? Did they trade tools, or stories, or blood? For tens of thousands of years, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals coexisted across Europe and Western Asia. They lived in neighboring caves. They tracked the same prey. Their tools, their weapons, their fire, all advanced, all evolving. Yet only one species would remain. This is the mystery that unsettles scientists and philosophers alike. Because Neanderthals were not inferior. Their brains were as large, sometimes larger. They cared for their sick. Buried their dead. May have sung or painted or prayed. So what tilted the scales? Some say it was our voice, the power of language, more fluid and nuanced. Others say it was our imagination, our ability to plan, deceive, organize. We crafted necklaces from shells, carved animals from ivory, painted myths into stone. Where Neanderthals lived in the present, we lived in possibilities. Or perhaps the answer lies in networks, groups of humans binding together in larger tribes, pooling resources, spreading innovations. A biological internet of survival. Still, extinction rarely has a single face. Perhaps it was a slow eclipse, as glaciers shifted, forests thinned, and Homo sapiens spread like wind, relentless and adaptive, and so they disappeared. Not with a scream, but with silence. Their ashes still settle in our breath. Their bones still echo in our genes. But their stories? Those are ours to remember, or forget. The earth does not forget. It keeps a record, not in words, but in fragments. Bones buried in silence. Teeth worn by ancient meals. A footprint hardened in volcanic ash. Together, these become our mirror, reflecting not who we are, but who we've been. As of today, scientists have identified over 20 distinct hominin species, all part of the sprawling human lineage. Some left behind full skeletons. Others, only a piece of skull, or a single molar. But each one adds a verse to the long, unfinished song of us. Australopithecus afarensis, known best through Lucy, walked upright over 3 million years ago, with a chimpanzee-sized brain but human-like feet. Homo habilis, the handy man, emerged with rudimentary tools and a spark of innovation. Homo erectus, tall, enduring, and adaptable, may have built the first fires and left Africa for distant lands. And Denisovans? We didn't even know they existed until 2010, discovered not through a fossil, but a finger bone, found in a Siberian cave, whispering DNA from deep time. Each species was a draft, a version of human life sculpted by terrain, climate, and chance. Fossils reveal clues. The shape of a pelvis tells us how they walked. The curve of a cranium hints at cognitive capacity. Stone tools mark intelligence. Burial sites suggest emotion. And through the science of paleogenomics, we now extract ancient DNA, bridging the biological gaps between cousin species. What we find in the dirt shapes who we are above it. The bones cannot lie. But they don't shout either. They whisper. And we are only just beginning to listen. Bones tell part of the story. But blood tells the rest. Hidden in every cell of your body is a code, a script 3 billion letters long, co-authored by your ancestors, and their lost cousins. Genetics has done what no archaeologist ever could, resurrected voices without skeletons. And in doing so, it revealed that we are not pure. We are a mosaic, fragments of other humans braided into our own lineage. Take the Neanderthals. Thought extinct. Thought forgotten. And yet, most people of European and Asian descent carry 1 to 2% of their DNA. Ghost genes, woven silently into our skin, our immune systems, perhaps even our thoughts. Then came the Denisovans, a species we never saw alive, never sculpted from skull to face. We know them only from genetic residue and a handful of bones. Yet their DNA lingers in millions today, especially among Melanesians and indigenous Australians, affecting everything from disease resistance to oxygen levels at high altitudes. And there are others. Genetic shadows with no name, no fossil, no photograph. Ghost populations, as scientists call them, ancient humans who left no trace but their fingerprints in our genome. They loved. They migrated. They vanished. But they did not fully disappear. They live in US.So how many species existed before us? The answer may be more complicated than we imagined. Because their bones may be buried, but their essence, their code, walks on. In you. In me. In everyone. What we carry from those who came before us is not just DNA. It's instinct. Memory. Mannerism. The way we tilt our heads when we think. The fear that stirs in the dark. The comfort found in circles, in firelight, in stories told aloud. We didn't just inherit tools, we inherited wonder. Every trait in our bodies tells a story. Our ability to walk upright, passed down through painful trial and adaptation. Our thumbs, sculpted by countless generations gripping tools, stones, and each other's hands. Our emotions, fear, joy, jealousy, love, refined over millennia of social living, conflict, cooperation. And so many of these weren't born with just Homo sapiens. They were borrowed, absorbed, exchanged, over fires, over generations, over mating and migration and extinction. We look at our cousins, the ones who didn't make it, and we think of them as lost. As failures. But what if they were teachers? The Neanderthals showed us endurance. The Denisovans showed us strength at altitude. Earlier hominins gave us the bones to run, to climb, to speak. Even in their silence, they speak. Even in their disappearance, they shape the path we now walk. When you laugh, grieve, wonder, create, you're not alone. You're accompanied by millions of ghosts. Not haunting you, but humming quietly in the rhythms of your being. We did not inherit a throne. We inherited a fire, passed hand to hand, species to species, across the shadowed corridors of time. Once, we were one among many. The world was not just ours. It was shared, with creatures who walked upright, hunted in groups, cared for their dead, shaped their tools, and perhaps, dreamed in firelight, just as we do. But today, we stand alone. Homo sapiens, the last hominin. That word, alone, should echo. Because it wasn't always a victory. Some of our cousins were stronger. Some were more resilient. Some even had larger brains. But now, only we remain, a single species walking atop the ruins of an ancient, forgotten kinship. How did it happen? Some say it was competition, for food, for mates, for land. Others say it was disease, climate, or chance. Maybe we simply adapted better. Or maybe, we just got lucky. But whatever the cause, we didn't just outlive them. In many cases, we absorbed them. Took in their genes, their lessons, their presence, and continued forward. Alone, but not untouched. And yet, that solitude carries a weight. The world feels quieter than it once was. Our minds, so complex, still search for voices lost to the silence that we build cities, launch rockets, split atoms, but no other humans remain to share it with. No one to argue with around the fire. No parallel minds to challenge or reflect our own. We call ourselves exceptional. But perhaps, we're simply the last. And being the last, is its own kind of extinction. So what does it mean, to be the last? To have survived not just time, but every alternative? Every branch of humanity that might have been? It means our existence is not guaranteed, it's inherited. A thread spun through conflict, love, catastrophe, and chance. We are not the peak of evolution. We are its latest question mark. Behind us lie countless others, beings who thought, who moved, who felt. They were not lesser versions of us. They were different expressions of the same spark. And in their ending, we began. But that beginning carries responsibility. We hold within us the memories of a species that climbed out of trees and into ideas. That sculpted stone into music. That made gods from stars, and myths from bones. That didn't just adapt, but imagined. To be human, then, is not to be better, but to be burdened. To walk knowing we were once many, and are now one. That our thoughts are crowded with shadows. That when we speak, we echo, perhaps that's why we ask these questions. Not just to understand the past, but to remember who we are in the vastness of time. To be human is to search. To carry not just names, but stories that outlived the bodies who told them. And in knowing them, we begin to know ourselves. We often imagine the past as silence, ancient bones in dry ground, forgotten names carved in stone, dust where footsteps used to be. But the past is not silent. It whispers in our blood, in our eyes, in the shape of our hands. It lives inside the rhythm of our gait, the curve of our spine, the patterns in our dreams. We are the echo of a choir that no longer sings. Neanderthals. Denisovans. Erectus. Floriensis. Nality. Species once as real as you and I, who loved, feared, fought, and wondered. Gone, but not erased. Their chapters did not end in vain. Because their stories live on, in our cells, in our language, in the way we still search for meaning beneath the stars, that we are not alone in history. We are the sum of all that came before, shaped by their triumphs, haunted by their endings. And now, as the only surviving humans, we must decide what kind of ancestors we will become. Will we burn bright and vanish? Or will we pass the flame, gently, fiercely, into futures we'll never see? This is our moment. Not to forget, but to remember for those who never got to. Because in the end, to know how many human species walked before us is to understand how fragile, how precious, and how miraculous it is that we still walk at all.